because putting the sunshine on this and exposing it neutralizes the threat. There's no element of surprise if we come out with information, and more people do, like Mr. Schratt, showing what these aircraft that men are making at the Skunk Works and at Northrop and at Boeing are, and what their capabilities are. But we also need more people like these whistleblowers. Now there's a whole group of people, I'm not going to go through all this, I'm going to hold up a few of them, who are part of a group who have been exposing the electronic warfare systems. You know, here we have an NSA veteran, Naval Academy graduate, a practicing physician who is targeted with these weapons, a whistleblower from DARPA, U.S. Army officer in physics, a whole group of people I have here who have come forward with these electromagnetic weapon systems and how innocent people have been victimized, targeted by them. And being one of those people, and I've been someone who has been targeted with these systems, I can tell you that if you know they exist, you won't be fooled by them. If you don't know they exist, you will. This is why, you know, in the Vedas it says knowledge is the greatest purifier. If we have knowledge, then we can discern. If we have no knowledge and no information and we're in the dark, we can be deceived. And this is also why Lieutenant Colonel Tom Bearden put out years ago this book called The Real Star Wars. And Tony Craddock, my friend, just released it. I wrote the foreword to it. I had a copy of it here somewhere. And it's about these electromagnetic, radionic, and psychotronic systems. And this was released in the 80s. It's a little monograph this big. And Lieutenant Colonel Bearden knew about this. And so he began to talk about it. Now, so he could talk about it and not get in trouble, he always referred to it as Soviet technology. That was just a ruse. He had to. He had to, because he had very top secret clearances. But this information's been out for decades, but it's sort of hidden in plain sight. What I want to do is connect these dots to folks so that you understand that, yes, there are extraterrestrial civilizations. They're very concerned with what's happening on this planet. And yes, there are humans that have these assets that mimic and have reached, and I'm going to use this word carefully, parity, near equivalence with what an appearance would be of an extraterrestrial vehicle, because they have become more and more and more refined over the decades, up to and including very powerful electromagnetic systems that are transdimensional, can materialize things, if you go to Dugway Proving Grounds near Salt Lake City, near Provo, there are things going on there that look 100% ET, but they're not extraterrestrial, they're alien. They're man-made. But it's incredibly well-defined, well-developed. With that knowledge, maybe we will have discernment. And with that knowledge and discernment, maybe we won't be fooled again. This is my hope and my prayer. And if we don't get discernment, we're going to be sitting ducks, much more so than we were on 9/11. And I think that this is why, in my opinion, we have all have the responsibility to share this seminar and this information with the public, with everyone we know, as far-fetched as it may seem. Now, one of the things that I've wondered in my own mind is to what extent there have been people who are embedded in our society, who have had these scripted experiences and are sharing information that they believe to be true, but that have been completely scripted. Now, this is going to be very difficult for me to talk about. I don't like talking about personalities. You'll find that in the history of my entire career, I talk about issues and information, not people. But with that said, I want to talk about a gentleman who I knew quite well, who's passed away, named Dr. Fred Bell. Anybody ever heard of him? A few people. Interesting character. So Dr. Bell, the name sound familiar? Bell, Alexander Graham Bell, descendant of Alexander Graham Bell. And he, in the disclosure materials, one of the only a couple people who aren't named name, rank, and serial number. And there's, I will tell you now, first time I've ever shared this, why he's not named. He shared information very important, but I had to be very careful of what I included. Now, this gets into the sort of unique responsibility I have in this regard. And he had been given over to the MK Ultra program at the agency at birth, as a very, literally at birth, to the intelligence community, to be programmed as sort of a genius in aerospace and technology, and to work inside the system as sort of a electronically, psychotronically controlled slave. Now, that's how I would put it. Now, his parents did this with knowledge of forethought. How anyone can do this to a child, I don't know. But he was. And I was at his home and saw his badges from Hughes aircraft, from the anti-gravity chamber that Hughes had, from all the different contractors and things he had worked on. And he had gotten, and actually had met Werner von Braun also. And his specialty, what they had trained him to do, was to develop weapon systems that would target, hit, and knock down extraterrestrial vehicles when they came out of trans-dimensional space-time into 3D. Now, I don't want to get too techie here again, but when you're going from the Andromeda galaxy, 2.5 million light years from here, to Earth, you're not going at the speed of light. It'd take you 2.5 million years to get here. That's what a light year is. It's the distance light goes in a year. So it'd take you 5 million years to go back and forth at the speed of light. Never mind the space shuttle or some piece of junk like the rockets and jets. So if you are an interstellar civilization, you are by definition trans-dimensional, because you're going to go through the crossing point of light, you're going to cross into these other dimensions, and then in point A and point B, 2.5 million light years distance, Andromeda galaxy, Earth, then is here, because you're bypassing linear space-time. Does it make sense? And you can do this through teleportation resonance systems. Anyway, so, which, by the way, we started experimenting also with in the 50s and were able to perfect. In fact, even before then, the so-called Philadelphia experiment, which didn't happen in Philadelphia, that's another long story, I won't get into the weeds here, was in the 40s. So these electronics were being experimented with humans, but interstellar civilizations perfected this many, many, many millions of years ago. Some of them are certainly hundreds of thousands of years ago. Now what that means is that as they then come into near Earth or materialize in our solar system, at that point they're trackable in the Deep Space Network, out of NORAD and other facilities, and off of satellites. As they approach Earth, then they can be targeted with these electronic scalar systems and hit. And that's what's been going on for over 70 years. This is an existential threat to Earth. Now, I have personal, detailed knowledge, and so did Dr. Bell. He admitted he was involved not only in developing the technologies, but present when they were being used, actuated, and would go out and witness them. Boom, one would hit an ET craft, drop straight into the Pacific Ocean. 1965. 51 years ago. So the fact that this has been going on for 70 years or more since Roswell, and there has not been a serious pushback and overt pushback by these interstellar civilizations is remarkable. I doubt we would have behaved similarly. And this is why I say to people, I think you should be much less concerned about the extraterrestrial civilizations than the human. And if you want to know where the problem is, go find a mirror and look in it right now. But Dr. Bell, when he was discussing this, also would then tell me about these electronic systems that he was put through in MK Ultra, where he had experiences that were transdimensional in consciousness, he thought were real, with beings and civilizations that were horrific, horrible. And that's how they taught him to hate the aliens. So whenever he would, that's how they got him to be enthusiastic about the science, because he had these experiences with these aliens. It was all a scripted psychotronic hologram. And he would then say, like Will Smith in Independence, let's go kick alien butt. And he'd go out there, and when he would they would hit one of these ET craft and it would fall down, he would just jump up and down with joy. We killed another one of the bastards. And I'd sit in his home as he related these things and went, whoa, boy, this is very dangerous stuff. You're dealing with civilizations that have been visiting us on Earth for, dare I say, millions of years. Ancient aliens, anyone? But yes, I mean, we've never been alone. And suddenly we're doing atomic weapons and the nuclear weapons and these scalar weapons and all this other stuff. And they have not pushed back yet. What does that say? It's almost a Gandhi-esque restraint. You know, when Gandhi was shot by the guy who assassinated him, he turned and blessed them and fell. The last thing he did was bless the person in a Christ-like act of forgiveness. So, you know, if they were so horrific, we would have known about it about 1945. It had been all over, point, set, match, finished. Now, when I was at the Vatican having a theological conversation about this with Monsignor Balducci, that was facilitated by my very good friend Paula Harris, who's an angel in this field. And Monsignor Balducci was a senior theologian, actually a demonologist for the Pope, Pope John Paul. And we were talking about this. He says, oh, it's so ridiculous. He says, we all know, of course, if they were a threat, it'd all be over. And he said, and I love it, with classic Italian flourish, very tall patrician figure, I think taller than I am. And he said, lower than humanity, there cannot exist in the universe. It was hilarious. I was in his apartment overlooking the Vatican. And it was a very interesting perspective from this senior theologian. Now, he did say that, however, there's an attempt to confuse people with things from other dimensions that are like demons or even angels with ETs. But he says, you know what? Angels, and by inference, demons, don't need flying saucers. But people, because of the strangeness of how an interstellar civilization going through dimensions can appear, people will conflate them or confuse them with either a demon or an angel. Guess what? The intelligence community loves that you're confused. And they put things out to further confuse you. To wit, mutilations. Okay, there's a man, Denver, a very eminent medical doctor, fellow physician, hematologist, oncologist named Dr. John Altshuler. His uncle was the great General Jimmy Doolittle of World War II, who was sent over to the European theater during World War II by FDR to look into Foo Fighters. Yes, it's a rock group. Hello, Dave Grohl. But it was originally the object seen in World War II that the Nazis thought was a secret U.S. Allied weapon. We thought was a secret Nazi weapon. General Doolittle went over there, investigated it, and they were these trans-dimensional objects, spheres, balls of energy that would go around our aircraft, go down the center aisle of the planes, right between the men, out the other side, and this and that. And he came back and reported to FDR, and this is during World War II. that, and I'm quoting, he said, "Sir, those are interplanetary vehicles." So that's how far back this goes, and how far back it's been studied very seriously. And so Dr. John Altshuler had a knowledge of this, deep knowledge of this, from his uncle, who was this general. He then lived in Colorado where Snippy the horse, y'all remember Snippy the horse? The first so-called cattle mutilation was a cattle that was a horse. He was called out because he was a pathologist, hematologist, pathologist, and he was interested in this. So he went out, began to study this in great detail, concluded they were all being done by counterintelligence operations using extraordinary technologies that are all human, staging it to look alien for its fear factor and its psychological warfare value. When did he conclude that? Oh, long before An Alien Harvest was written by Linda Moulton Howe. And this is known in UFO circles. Now the question becomes, and this is a very big problem, what would compel someone to continue to report out to the public things that are extraterrestrial when it was established by the only true medical doctor and scientist in the field decades ago that it was a hoaxed, staged, false flag, supportive, in other words, an event supporting the false flag directive from the 50s. I told you this would be very bad news for all of you and your belief systems. I do not apologize in a way because I think it's unfortunate. What's unfortunate is that the great heroes like Dr. Altshuler, who's passed away, who had knowledge and spoke of this, and a couple people in this room I think probably knew him, were run amok of and trampled underfoot. And the sensationalism of fear and the sensationalism of the evil aliens are here to eat us for lunch, and now are they eating us for lunch and abducting us or mutilating us on top of it. Well, guess what? It's all a lie, a hoax. Now, there are certainly people who have had horrific experiences and terrible things done to them. And I've had some things myself like this. But, and they are excused for not knowing whether it's extraterrestrial or man-made, because who would know this? But at the same time, there are people who should know this or have known it who have covered it up. And this we cannot allow any further. This has got to be called out. The other problem is when you have people like Dr. Bell who have been having these experiences, we have to understand that there are some very, very good people out there speaking about information, experiences they've had that they do believe to be extraterrestrial. That, in fact, and I'm thinking now of a man I haven't met, but who is a wonderful gentleman from all accounts, a guy named Corey Good, and who's doing the Full Disclosure Project, and he and I are like hand in glove, supportive of many things, but some of the things he's recounting about slave trade and slave planets and things of this that he experienced because he was, as a 6 or 7 year old, I understand, taken into the military abduction program, like Dr. Bell. And I have no doubt he believed that those events were extraterrestrial. But I think that what I want people to understand is we have to be very careful about our assessment of what's out there in the universe based on people who have been in these programs who are, and I know that there was an executive at Gaia TV who was furious that I used this word, but who have been victims of this. And I don't think it's wrong to say if you're a 6 or 7 year old child and you're taken into a military abduction program and have stuff done to you, you've been a victim. I know that there are other people. I know Dr. Bell was a victim. Now, this is not to say that the person is a bad person or a wrong person. It's just to say that we have to look at what is being shared and understand that there could be information that is accurate, information that might have been scripted, information and experiences that have been had that have been programmable. So the holographic psychotronic systems that have been in existence since the 50s would allow for people, and have allowed for people, to have experiences that they 100% believe. Just as the man told me, people would believe that they were, if they had a conversation with their personal God, they'd pass a lie detector. They are sincere about what they're reporting. There is no, I'm not saying any deceit is in play. What I'm saying is that it would be very easy to deceive somebody who's a child or a young adult with these fearsome weapon systems and technologies that are in the hands of absolute psychopaths. I mean, true psychopaths in the covert programs. And I know who some of these folks are, and they will stop at nothing to see that people are convinced that there is a threat, as Ronald Reagan said at the United Nations, that we should unite against and fight, to unite the world around. And all I have to say is that if the future is that future, you might as well dig a hole and climb in it. So we better wake up and understand that the information that is out there has to get looked at from many perspectives. What's the origin of the experience? Was it deep, unacknowledged special access projects that hoaxed it? Is that person having an experience with an extraterrestrial, interstellar civilization, an entity from another dimension that's not extraterrestrial, which is also out there? A scripted program from the intelligence community using these very advanced technologies that have been in development for 70 or 80 years? What is it? And it's not, you're not, I'm not trying, you have to ask these questions. And you have to begin to understand that there is a capacity to use this sort of information in a way that would redound to whom? The military, industrial, gangbangster, global complex of fascists that are desperate to have World War III be interplanetary. Now, this is why when you start talking about this issue of false INW, indications and warnings, deceptive indication and warnings, false flag, it's a very deep hole to go down. And what I would encourage people to do is to question what part of this, what they are learning, seeing, has been programmed into our society, and many times innocently has been piggybacked on people. One more level of what I call this, so I've gone through the aircraft that are anti-gravity, the electromagnetic weapon systems, and now the human intelligence. There are a lot of people who have had actual ET contact experiences that when that is known by the intelligence community, and I've had this confirmed to be by multiple independent corroborating sources, are then targeted by the intelligence community with a man-made abduction event to confuse them. And so that they don't know what part, where did the ET event end and the man-made one start. Do you understand what I'm saying? That has been done because everything is tracked. Everything is tracked. When these events happen that are ET, the intelligence community absolutely knows it's happened anywhere on the planet, and they can come in with a special operations team and then victimize that person who's had contact with an ET with a man-made, hoaxed alien encounter. So it gets very complex, and I regret to inform you that this is not something that is new. It's been talked about actually since the 70s and 80s by various people, but it's been hushed up. Hushed up by the UFO subculture, hushed up by the intelligence community. And the reason for it is that people don't want their paradigms changed. I think a lot of it is people don't want their belief systems challenged. And this gets into the last part of what I want to share before we take a break, which I'm sure you all need by now. And that is, let's look at the roots of human conflict. If you go back thousands of years, there is a connection that we have, millions of years, with other primates. We're 98% identical to chimpanzees and gorillas. And it's been found that chimpanzees and other monkeys do organize into troops that fight each other based on territory, based on differences, based on otherness, even if they look a little different. What are the roots of racism? What are the roots of homophobia? What's the roots of ethnic conflict? Why is this? This is the real original sin of Homo sapiens, of humans. Why do we view anything that is other than us as a threat? Well, there is some biological evolutionary specialists have said, well, this was done because there was an evolutionary advantage to groups that were forming socially to be able to dominate a territory, what have you, and another one would be a threat, so they'd get into fights and war them off, and it's very territorial. But now that we're in a civilization with thermonuclear weapons and anti-gravity and electromagnetic weapons and scalar weapons and all this, we have to have a spiritual awakening, in my opinion, where we realize that we can transcend all these isms. And I want to add another ism, alienism. Alienism, as I'm going to define it tonight, is the proclivity to view anything that is non-human, but an intelligent life form, as a potential threat. And the threat is directly proportional to how different they either appear or behave from us. This is rooted in thousands of years of human experience, where one tribe would attack and rape another, one ethnicity, one religion. So whether it's homophobia, Islamophobia, religious, ethnic, racist tendencies, these have a root that go back thousands of years in human experience. And they have found that when you develop a behavior like that, epigenetically, it is passed on within a generation or two, not thousands of years. But it means, this is the good news, you can reverse it in a generation or two. We can reverse racism. We can reverse alienism. We can reverse all of these things that have divided us into warring factions. And guess what? We have to. It is a requirement of our survival. We can no longer live as a species that views anything that we don't understand or is different from us as a priori, immediately, a threat and get into a fight with them. Whether it is another race, another gender, another sexual orientation, another ethnicity, or another species from another planet. Because that only ends in destruction. Now, when we were just clubbing each over the head with, clubs and spears and stuff, or muskets even, it was one thing to behave this way. It was deleterious and appalling and savage. To do it with thermonuclear weapons and these other classified weapons, and then to start bamming around out in space with this consciousness of alienism and division, is fraught and very risky. So I would say that, we shall overcome this. We must overcome it. It is in our collective experience as humans, but we can also overcome it through the force of our intellect, through spiritual development, and through the realization that within the field of conscious intelligence, there's a singularity of mind, and that all life in the universe and all intelligent life is awake through that same spirit. Doesn't matter who they are, where they are. And if we view ourselves and these other civilizations with the understanding of what the conscious mind is as an omnipresent field that is non-local, that there is a singularity of consciousness in mind. As Erwin Schrödinger said, the total number of minds in the universe is one. This is the father of modern quantum physics. And we begin to experience that in our meditation, our prayers, and our spiritual consideration. And this is why I think the crisis we're in, as complex as all this is, I've tried to go through a quick trip in 2 hours. The solution is, well, not simplistic, simple. It is spiritual. It's a spiritual development. Not necessarily religious. I mean, I sort of make a distinction. Sometimes there's an inverse relationship between religiosity and spirituality. That's Greer's theorem. But not to say that not all religious people are not spiritual, but I'm just saying that if you're a fanatic religiously, you tend to not be very spiritual. And it becomes divisive. I mean, how many wars are we fighting over religious differences, which when you boil it down is ridiculous. So I think that we have to go deeper than that. But if we're now having to deal with interstellar civilizations that are waiting for us to join the interstellar club and the interstellar society, which is what's been happening for many decades, we're going to have to find a solution to this thinking, this paradigm of division, of racism and alienism, that the intelligence community, the bad actors here, not the good guys, but the bad actors have been exploiting because they know there is a history of people hating and fearing and fighting anyone that is different from them, whether it's a different sexual orientation and bashing gay people, or a different race with slavery, or a different gender and the suppression of women, or a different religion, on and on and on. And they know that they can exploit that. And they have been exploiting it. And we have to stand up and wake up and say, no more. We won't be fooled again. It is time for us to say, we're going to start living differently. We're going to have a civilization that is peaceful, that has free zero-point energy, that is just, and that is living in complete peace with itself and with others. And we are not going to go into space with weapon systems. We are not going to go into space looking for another alienism, another group to fight. And that if someone tries to stage an event, we're all going to call it out as the hoax that it is, and not go along with that, what I'm calling scripted Armageddon. They would love to see a shutdown of our civilization and the extermination of about 5 billion people through a conflict that they will stage. And they will manufacture Armageddon. And that's the big, deep plan that has been in place since the 50s. Those people in the intelligence community who know of this, I can't even put in words the extent to which they are devastated when they learn of it. Because they know how these folks are utilizing religiosity, racism, alienism, division to keep the fire burning. But the big one is going to be the launch of a hoaxed attack on the planet that would look 100% like an extraterrestrial event, and it is not. Now, when you also consider, anyone see Michael Jackson a couple years ago after he died in that holographic dance? Cool, huh? That's a declassified technology. You want to guess what's in the classified systems? You want to guess? 1,000 times better than that Michael Jackson on the stage. That looked 100% like him actually dancing. So let's begin to expose the fraud. Let's begin to expose this, not for the sake of rabble-rousing, but to awaken people to the danger. And then let's say, what are we going to do next? Because if you, look, you cannot, it's axiomatic, you cannot prove a negative, right? You already know that you can't prove a negative. However, if there were civilizations out there that were a threat to Earth and humanity, I think we'd know it by now. Secondly, if they are out there and they're operating sub rosa in a nefarious way, what's the solution to that? Weapon systems? when you're dealing with civilizations that are trans-dimensional interstellar, where they have a weapon system that they could hit a planet with a energy field and turn it into a pink dust floating through space and destroy that entire sphere. That capability exists. No, that's not the answer. And Martin Luther King had it right, and Christ had it right, and Gandhi had it right. Those approaches are not the correct approach. So even if there was such an existential threat, it cannot be managed by warmongers and militarists and people with these other agendas. We need to put together what I called for years ago a council on interplanetary relations that is devoted to peace and space, to the wise elders and youngsters of the planet, to work on this issue and deal with it openly. And this is something that is of the greatest import and urgency of anything in our lives. Because even if we bring out free energy and anti-gravity, but we live on this planet with the consciousness of division and hatred and warfare, that too will be weaponized, and it'll still destroy the planet. So that in and of itself isn't a solution. So this spiritual understanding of the essential oneness of life and the need for not just world peace, but universal peace. And that we are the generation, those of us living on Earth at this time, between the mid-20th century and the mid-21st century. I always joke that those of us between puberty and senility. Unfortunately, I'm getting closer to the latter. I know I have 8 grandchildren. Scary, me being a grandfather. 4 daughters and 8 grandchildren. So 8 grandchildren, beautiful, beautiful beings. That we owe it to our children and to the generations coming behind us, after us. Because the way I understand this is that we're closing out one era in the human experience, several 100,000 years in development. We're opening another era that's about 500,000 years in length, a cycle, universal cycle. And that cycle, the hallmark of it is universal peace. It'll be a day not followed by night, is how it is said. That there will be a period, we'll enter into peace on this planet and peace in space, but we will not slide back into the darkness of war, which has happened in the last cycle. There were periods of peace on Earth, like the Shambhala Kingdom and Enlightenment, but it always slid back into darkness. This next cycle is different. But how do you start that cycle? Is it not going to be some Ouija board in the sky, or someone's going to come down? And it's not going to be ETs landing on the White House lawn. It's us, the children of Earth, understanding this and creating that reality. It's time. It's time for us to do that.